Because man was created as a hunter and gatherer, we inherited an interest and love of nature. As we grow up, the influences around us push that instinct into the background. However, a love of nature in different degrees remains deep in all of us. As a wildlife filmmaker, Laszlo Erdos is someone with a special love of the natural world. He and his wife Jenny spend a lot of time observing and filming birds in the wild. They would like to share some of the beauty of nature with you and hope that by watching their films on Australian birds, you too will feel the need to help save all our natural habitats. This film was made in different parts of Australia and shows unique behaviour of some birds, behaviour never observed before. Nesting time for most of our songbirds is usually in spring, when daylight lengthens. It's a time when native plants are in full blossom, a rich environment for insects. Honey-eaters and insect-eating birds find enough food to bring up their young. It's also a time when butterflies, like this rare swordgrass, emerge from their cocoons. This pair of blue wrens selected dense undergrowth to build their covered nest with a side entrance. Superb blue wrens are the best known of the Australian fairy wren family because they live in the southeast of our continent, where most of the human population live. The male bird's plumage is very bright and colourful. The females are greyish-brown. The female does most of the work during nesting, including incubation, but the male feeds her while she does this. He never enters the nest, only perching at the entrance. When the eggs hatch, both male and female feed the fledglings until they're independent. Very often, fully grown birds from an earlier clutch join the parents to feed the recently hatched young, so that they can leave the nest as quickly as possible. In this way, the fairy wren's chances of survival are much improved. For many young birds, the time of greatest danger is before they leave the nest, when they're easily taken by predators. Birds bathe in all kinds of ways, and most have a selected spot at a nearby waterhole. This white-fronted chat has taken the wren's regular bathing spot. The wren tries to chase it away, but the chat doesn't give up easily. Red-rumped parrots come here to drink, stretching from a branch just above deeper water. A tiny female wren tries to frighten away a much bigger intruder, a willy wagtail. Now the wrens have the waterhole to themselves, where they continue bathing undisturbed. Wrens spend most of their time behind cover. but prefer to sing on an open perch. It's their way of proclaiming a territory for themselves, to keep other members of their species away. The male can be heard at almost any time, night or day. Females only sing occasionally. This mature male blue wren has lost one of his legs. He's searching for insects on the ground and seems to manage quite well, even with a handicap. In more open country, we find a Jackie Winter, one of a pair nesting nearby. The Jackie Winter is one of 16 Australian flycatchers. Both male and female have similar grey plumage and live alone or in pairs. Rich native flowers attract many insects, food for our flycatchers. Here, both parents are busy feeding and attending to their fully grown young. Most insects are caught in flight. Their shallow nest is built on a horizontal fork, 2 or 3 meters from the ground. At nesting time, Jackie Winters are quite aggressive, often chasing similar-sized birds from the district. A New Holland honeyeater is feeding nearby, collecting nectar from flowering bushes. Then, something amazing happens. As soon as the female Jackie Winter leaves her clutch, the New Holland honeyeater takes her place. Trying to mother them, she offers food. The honeyeater repeats this behavior many times whenever the fledglings are alone. She quickly goes away when the parents return. The extraordinary thing about this behavior is that New Holland honeyeaters feed on nectar, while Jackie Winters are strictly insect eaters. Their methods of feeding are also very different. New Holland honeyeaters collect nectar in their crops, which is then squirted into the young bird's open beak. But a young Jackie Winter waits to see an insect carried by the parents before opening its beak. These fledglings must be puzzled at not seeing any food in the honeyeater's beak. After a short investigation, it's soon obvious why the New Holland honeyeater has such a strong mothering instinct. Close to the Jackie Winter's nest is the honeyeater's own nest, with her 2 babies killed and half-eaten by ants. It's quite remarkable that the honeyeater still has such a strong mothering instinct after losing her young. Rejected and repeatedly frightened away from the young Jackie Winters by their parents, she finally joins a large group of New Holland honeyeaters. They always drink in groups, so she feels a sense of security. Before long, one of the fledglings leaves the nest for the first time. It wants to explore where its parents find insects. Eagerly it flaps its wings, learning how to fly. It's now September, the beginning of Australia's spring, and the first pallid cuckoos have arrived, disturbing most of the birds in the district. More pallid cuckoos arrive, so Laszlo looks around to see what has attracted them. It's very unusual to see more than one or two together. Laszlo discovers a plague of caterpillars in the ground vegetation. They're an important part of the cuckoo's diet, which explains why there are so many. In a way, the cuckoo helps the environment, as it practically lives on caterpillars, helping to control them. A plague could cause a lot of damage. Cuckoos always lay in other birds' nests, and favourites are the flycatchers. When the cuckoo egg hatches, the original babies will be thrown out by the young cuckoo, and it will be the only one to survive. Jackie Winters know by instinct that they must drive the cuckoo away from the nesting area. Laszlo found a nest being built high up in a tall eucalypt, so he borrowed a ladder from the nearest farmer, several kilometres away. Well camouflaged, he soon builds a makeshift tripod in the tree for the camera, quite close to the nest. Laszlo will spend many hours here, patiently filming the occupants, a pair of immature red-capped robins. Because small songbirds are well down in the food chain, they are quite vulnerable to predators. So they often start nesting before they're fully adult themselves to ensure the species' survival. These young red-capped robins are a good example. Neither have full adult plumage. The female is building on top of an old nest, well camouflaged by a large growth on the tree. She collects all the nesting material herself. The immature male will look like this adult bird in a year. This young female has probably never built a nest before, yet she knows by instinct how to do it perfectly. She uses plant fibers, fluff, seed hairs, and feathers. She does all the nest building and incubation while the male hunts for food, nearly all of which he gives to her, even a moth. After the young have hatched, both parents will feed them. Now the female is eager to finish the nest as she struggles with a large feather, which keeps sticking to her beak as she tries to put it into the lining. Mating takes place, because the eggs have to be fertilized. Although the male is not involved in the nest building, he likes to check it occasionally. the female returns to the nest, smoothing and shaping it with her wings. Flying back and forth, gathering materials for her nest, takes a lot of the female's energy while the eggs develop in her. While both robins are away from the nest, a yellow-rumped thornbill sneaks in and steals building material from it. Although songbirds often recycle material from deserted nests, they don't usually steal from new ones. The female robin doesn't seem to notice that some nesting material has been stolen. Driving through patches of very tall Patterson's curse, the film unit arrives in a district usually colonized by rainbow birds. Patterson's curse is an introduced plant in Australia and causes a lot of agricultural damage. Beekeepers love it, however, because of the nectar it provides. It's now October, and the rainbow birds have returned from migration. Some are starting a nesting colony. Rainbow birds are found on most of the world's continents, and Australia's variety is migratory, as they all are. When the breeding season is over, they move to warmer districts in search of swarming insects. They live in pairs and nest in loose colonies. In Australia, like most continents, the rainbow bird is one of the most brilliantly coloured birds. In the field, it's easiest to recognise which is the male and which the female by the length of the two centre feathers in their tails. The decorative ends of these feathers are longer in the male than in the female. Here's the male, and this is the female. These decorative ends often break off during the breeding season. Nesting time is when flowers and butterflies are the most plentiful. Rainbow birds are also called bee-eaters, because they eat bees. They're well equipped to eat them because the end of their long beak is made entirely of horn material, without blood vessels or nerves, and can't be stung. Most other insect-eating Australian birds don't touch bees because they haven't got this long, horny beak and would be stung. A good example is this Horsefield bronze cuckoo, an insect eater. It lives peacefully amongst the bees. Rainbow birds build their nests at the end of tunnels. Panting heavily, the male digs on the hot surface while the female relaxes, sunbaking on her regular perch. Still panting heavily, the male joins his mate for a well-deserved break. Rainbow birds prefer hunting for their food, usually flying from high branches where they have a perfect view of swarming insects. All undigested food remains in the bird's crop, where it forms a pellet. And until it spits out this pellet, it cannot eat again. Scientists can further their knowledge of birds just by studying the regurgitated pellets. The easiest way to collect them is by observing the bird's regular perches. One can often find pellets under them. These pellets from the rainbow bird contain mostly the remains of insects. While sound recording, Jenny disturbs a wedge-tailed eagle from its perch. It's just regurgitated a pellet. Looking at it shows that the bird recently ate a dead lamb. Wedge-tailed eagles usually prefer carcasses. We can see from this pellet that the hardest and most indigestible material is the wool and a hoof. Continuous study of any bird pellets could reveal the secrets of its eating habits right through the seasons. Rainbow birds, like this pair, usually have a favourite perch where many of their activities are performed during the day. The male continues his hard work, digging a tunnel for the nest, even though it's very hot. He excavates the tunnel, usually in the side of a bank or gently sloping ground. His short legs scratch out piles of sand, which have been loosened by his beak. The eggs are laid in a chamber at the end of the tunnel, which can be up to 1 meter in length. For people with the slightest interest in nature, it's a delightful experience to observe them in their natural habitat. Pairs of rainbow birds are often joined by another female. After a brief rest, the male continues digging the nesting chamber, because it must be ready for the female to lay her first egg. He digs tirelessly, the wings supporting his body as he flattens the mound of sand near the nest entrance, so that it'll be less obvious to enemies. It's surprising to see that rainbow birds also eat butterflies. Butterflies are not usually eaten by birds. The rainbow bird's bathing method is quite unusual. They never perch close to the water. Instead, they soar above treetops, suddenly turning and plunging into the water for a bath or a drink. A white-faced heron, sharing the waterhole, catches and eats a fully grown tadpole. The kookaburra's bathing method is different again. Flying in at a low angle, it strikes the surface of the water with great force. At that speed, it could easily miscalculate and finish up between the plants on the shore. This young kookaburra makes a clumsy attempt to copy its parents. The adult bird dries itself at the base of a eucalypt, where it's attacked by a brown tree creeper, nesting above in the trunk. Scarlet robins always bathe in shallow water, usually with the family. When it comes to bathing, the red wattlebird is an aerial acrobat. Flying parallel to the surface, it suddenly somersaults and dives head first into the water. Then, with heavy wing flaps, it flies away. Eastern rosellas have come to the water only for a drink, while the red-backed parrots make a lot of noise as they splash bathe in the shallow water. Suddenly, sensing danger, all the birds leave. An Australian goshawk arrives and waits in ambush. The constant traffic of small birds at the waterhole attracted him, but with his prey vanished, the hawk takes a bath. While falcons hunt their prey in open chase, hawks are exactly the opposite. They use every trick to take their prey in ambush. After drying on a perch, the goshawk finally flies off. As the sun sets, the flock of New Holland honeyeaters return to enjoy a shower, and galahs come down for their evening drink before perching for the night. The hoary-headed grebe, on the other hand, fishes all night. And large flocks of introduced starlings fly into the wetlands where they sleep in the reeds for protection. Evocative night calls take over as the sun fades away. Many birds spend the night together, perching in big flocks for security, because if an attack by a night predator occurs, they all make an unbearable noise and frighten it away. To the average person living in a town or city, the moon coming and going means very little. It's hard for a city dweller to comprehend what an important role the moon plays in the wilderness. The hooded robin's calls can be heard all night. To give some indication of just how many insects inhabit this area, Laszlo has set up a light to attract them. At dawn, the night sounds are replaced by a morning chorus of birdsong. In this district, the calls of the crested bellbirds are one of the most predominant. They start at the first crack of dawn and continue until the sun rises. The morning chorus proves that there are many more varieties of birds in this district than one could believe when searching for them during the day. Early light colours the flock of galahs which have come to drink at the waterhole. crested bellbird keeps on singing as the light increases before he starts his daily search for food. Further away, all the bushes and trees are heavily infested with mistletoe. Australia is very rich with mistletoe varieties, well over 15. One of the most common has white berries. Because of the wide variety of mistletoes, Australia has a special bird living from them, the nomadic mistletoe bird. It's the only propagator of the mistletoe plant in Australia and is found in many parts of the country. Mistletoe birds feed on mistletoe berries, and when their droppings containing seeds stick to branches, in ideal weather conditions, they start to germinate. A seed penetrates the bark of the host tree with its roots, and a new bush grows. The mistletoe berry has a thin skin, under which is a layer of digestible material. The seed itself is covered with a layer of glue. There's a wide variety of mistletoe berries. The most common is white, but there's also pink, red, and yellow. The different mistletoes have a variety of flowers. Some have flowers and ripe berries the whole year round. If a host tree is invaded by too many mistletoes, it may die. Often the mistletoe manages to live another year or two, but eventually it also dies. This little butterfly has brilliantly colored wings, but when they're closed, it's perfectly camouflaged. It lives its entire life from caterpillar to butterfly amongst the mistletoe bushes. The mistletoe bird's oval-shaped nest hangs from a twig. It's woven from plant fibers and cobwebs and lined with lichen, blossom, and seed down. The mistletoe birds build their nests where plenty of food is available, so they're never far from the nest. The female feeds the young and often enters the nest to keep them warm. Notice the way she keeps her tail upright. This is because while she was sitting on eggs, she had to sink deep into the nest, and the only position for the tail was straight up. Now it's become a habit. To show the size of the nest, Laszlo hung a matchbox beside it. Because the color is the same as the male bird's breast, our male bird mistook the matchbox for an intruder. Excitedly, he searches for the other male bird, even after the box is removed. Like most songbirds, the mistletoe bird can only successfully rear his family if another male doesn't disturb his nesting territory. The excited male continues searching, even while his mate is back on the nest. The nest always has a side entrance and is usually 1 to 3 meters from the ground. The male very seldom feeds the fledglings or takes the fecal sac away. On this visit, the female takes the droppings from both the young, a tremendous amount, and swallows it. During the feeding period, both parents regularly visit their waterhole. Mistletoe birds belong to the family of flower peckers, which has 58 members worldwide. In Australia, we only have one representative, the mistletoe bird. After hatching, the young are fed with insects, but a day or two later, the main part of their diet will be mistletoe berries. Mistletoe birds feed their young as quickly as possible, so the young can leave the nest. The female gives them all the food she finds, and during that time she partly lives on the undigested material left in their droppings. Because of their adaptation to feeding on mistletoe berries, mistletoe birds have a specialized alimentary canal for a digestive system, where berries pass through quickly. The female takes food to the young. She then removes the droppings, which are always in a membrane sac. Without that sac, the glue surrounding the seeds would be fatal to the brood. In another mistletoe bird's nest some distance away are the skeletons of 2 fully grown young which have been killed and eaten by ants. Surprisingly, the ants left the joints of the skeleton intact. The vigilant parents apparently couldn't save them. Mistletoe birds also eat berries of the introduced pepper tree, which grows in many parts of Australia. However, their main diet is mistletoe berries. For thousands of years, man extracted the glue from the mistletoe berries and used it to trap small birds. This gluey material remains active even when exposed to the sun and rain. Bird trappers smeared this glue on branches, so that when the birds landed, they were hopelessly stuck. The trappers picked up the struggling birds and neutralized the glue with wood ash. The survival of mistletoe birds is fascinating. If the glue on the seed is so lethal for small birds to touch, how is it that mistletoe birds don't stick to their own droppings? The secret is that after depositing every single dropping, the mistletoe bird performs a dance. With stretched legs, it dances sideways along the branch so that it doesn't stick to the gluey seed. Here's the female performing her dance. Now let's see it in slow motion. It's even more visible with the male. This is the first time that the secret of the mistletoe birds has been observed and filmed. Here it is again in slow motion. This instinctive dance ensures the survival of both the mistletoe bird and the mistletoe plant. The new camp is in a heavily timbered district where the tree martins are nesting. They're one of the 5 varieties of swallows and martins in Australia, and like all birds of that family, live entirely on insects, which they catch in flight. Tree martins nest in colonies, always near a waterhole, which they often visit. They never actually land on the water, but glide over the surface to drink or bathe. This young tree martin knows by inherited instinct that it must be above water to have a drink, bend its head down and open its beak. It has to learn to do this successfully from its parents by gliding over the surface of the water. Nesting material collected by both sexes consists of dry plants and soil, which is mixed with saliva to form a kind of cement used to finish off the nest in a cavity. Nests are always built in tree hollows, where the entrance size is just large enough for the bird, limiting any attack by predators. This poor young tree martin has been fed too many poison insects by its parents. Swarming insects are often carried by the wind, and unfortunately some of them are affected by poison from insecticide spraying picked up in farming districts far away. What a pity that the poison stays so potent when collected in lethal quantities by birds. The poison is built up in this young tree martin and will bring its life to a short, sad end. Because the human population has dramatically expanded during this century, we must grow enough food to feed us all. If only we could do this without using poisons. Landing on its last perch, this young bird doesn't understand why it can't fly anymore, and hides its head from the world which caused all its suffering and pain. Unfortunately, next morning, only a few feathers remained of the sick little tree martin. A night predator had taken its miserable body away for a meal. Hopefully the poison wasn't enough to kill the predator as well. Now Jenny and Laszlo are heading into the wide open country, towards the dry riverbed district on the edge of the Australian desert. They hope to film interesting wildlife in that area. There's a hold-up. A cheeky little bearded dragon lizard stands in front of the four-wheel drive vehicle, adopting a menacing stance. The dragons are the most common of the large variety of Australian lizards in the subtropical area of this country. As we drive along the riverbed, a female crimson chat is seen hunting on the ground for insects. As chats are nomadic, there's a chance that they've started a nesting colony in the district. The male chat appears, increasing the possibility of finding the colony. As soon as the vehicle pulls up, Jenny starts recording. One of the first birds she tapes is the wedgebill. Its call dominates at this time of day. There are lots of wildflowers here now from an earlier rainfall. Some are already seeding, which means the species will survive whatever length of drought is ahead. sandy riverbeds are dry, and the water has sunk deep below the ground level. However, dry creek beds running into them are lined with clay, and dampness indicates the water level is not far away. Digging into the clay, Laszlo makes a water hole for the local birds. In the morning, the hole is full of water. A portable hide was assembled on the bank. It's well camouflaged. Hopefully, it will be possible to film birds at close range. The first visitor is a rufous songlark. Very soon it's followed by singing honeyeaters. Finishing its bath, the songlark dries itself before leaving. A male crimson chat arrives for a bath, but a female from another pair does everything to keep him away from the waterhole. So he finally gives up. The female has a nest with eggs nearby and believes this is her territory. Her mate helps guard the nest. After hatching, both parents will feed the young until they're independent, but incubation is left to the female. Australia has a large variety of finches, but the only one here is the zebra finch, the most widely distributed finch on the continent. They're very sociable birds and live in extended families, chattering and preening themselves most of the day. Being seed eaters, they're often found in the arid parts of Australia, but never far from water holes. Each group builds many nests. Some are only used as sleeping chambers. The base is lined with down. During the night, the birds' droppings are carefully plastered on the walls so that their feathers will not be soiled. Unfortunately, the weather changed in the afternoon, so the little waterhole didn't serve the purpose for long. A strong wind practically blew the spiny-cheeked honeyeater off his perch and brought heavy showers. Next day, all the water holes were filled. Emus are often seen in this part of the country and are usually in groups consisting of different generations. They're a typical part of the Australian landscape. There are abundant wildflowers here from an earlier rainfall. It's amazing to see such a variety in this arid district, as before the recent rainfall, there were 2 years of drought. Bulbs and seeds lay dormant during this time. A lesser wanderer butterfly feeds on a flower. Insects have prompted red-capped robins to nest. As was seen earlier, the female red-capped robin performs all the nesting duties. A kangaroo, on its way to a grazing spot, stops to look at the camouflaged camera. This male robin is a perfect specimen. his bright red feathers matching the red native poppy. Apart from feeding the female on the nest, the male spends part of the day keeping his plumage in perfect condition. Occasionally leaving the nest to find food for herself, the female red-capped robin discovers a large caterpillar and carefully squeezes its entire length to ensure it's dead before she swallows it. These black swans lead us into the wetlands, where we can see that Australia and the world still have wildlife worth protecting. Because of Australia's isolation, we have unique mammals and birds found nowhere else in the world. Many species are at risk because of man encroaching on their shrinking habitats. Urban development and the introduction of European predators and grazing animals have devastated our wildlife. Unfortunately, we're only beginning to learn about what we have just before we lose it. The human population has exploded worldwide, and with it, there's an enormous demand on resources. Technology and scientific knowledge, increasing ever faster than the population, should be used to save our Earth's natural environment, securing life as we know it for future generations. Today's sophisticated knowledge shouldn't be wasted on terrifying weapons of destruction, for no single country or nation could win a world war. The world would be destroyed. It's time to realize that by destroying our natural environment, the man-made environment is also doomed. The world's media seem to concentrate too much on the environmental damage which directly affects human health and life, instead of being concerned with the wider aspects of the Earth's air, water and soil on which all life depends, including our own.